Welcome to Enformed Insights, the official podcast of Informian.com and your guide to the world of public records and data analysis. Join our host, Fred Pfeiffer, as he interviews industry experts and shares practical tips for navigating the future of digital information. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Enformed Insights podcast. I am your host, Alex Richter, and today we're joined by a very special guest, AmeriLife Chief Lead Generation Officer, Bill DeCourcy. Bill, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Alex. Thank you very much for inviting me to be on the podcast.
Well, that's great to hear, and thanks again for joining us today. Now, I want to start off by jumping into your background. Could you share a bit about your background and your road to AmeriLife?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I've been fortunate enough to be with AmeriLife for the last 4 years, and prior to that, I held various positions in performance marketing, but also in consumer research and information technology. My background in information technology really grew out of my interest as a kid. I grew up in an era when computers, especially personal computers in the home, were first coming on the scene. I was fortunate enough to have access to a computer back when I was in elementary school, middle school, and high school. And it fascinated me, the potential that these machines had to transform our lives, both personally and later I learned professionally. So my interest in computers led to a course of study in information technology, which then led me to take on various IT roles, connecting computers at right around the time the internet was emerging as a business tool. So my first job out of college was as the director of information technology with a nonprofit organization in Michigan, which is where I'm originally from. But once you connect to the computers, if your curiosity continues, you then become interested in what they can actually do to empower people's professional productivity. And that led me into better understanding or seeking to better understand how empowerment could be derived from this connectivity. And that led me into looking at behavior, what people would call right now UX and UI type research or orientation, understanding how people interface between themselves and the computer. And that led to me going to school for my MBA at the University of Texas in Austin and having a focus on research and understanding consumer behavior and people's interactions with technology. From there, I moved to Electronic Arts, where I worked at EA Sports as lead researcher on their North American sports properties so that I could better understand what was motivating people to play the games, what was perhaps stopping people from playing the games, and then relaying that information in the language spoken by our production and programming teams as to how they could improve the games. After that, I moved on from consumer research to actually activating against the research that I was performing by getting into different performance marketing roles. So my career has been defined by first understanding the technology, understanding then how people interacted with that technology, and now it's about using those interaction points to drive great marketing outcomes.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate with that journey growing up with technology. I know I sure can myself. So you mentioned performance marketing, and I wanted to ask, what motivated you to enter the performance marketing industry?
To be honest, it was creating insights based on data, both qualitative and quantitative, observed and otherwise, and not seeing that put into action in an effective way. I really wanted to be part of the team that was taking insights and turning that into actions that resulted in positive business outcomes for those people who needed those outcomes. So that was the shift. Once you got to the point where you felt like you had the expertise necessary to gather the information about the people that you were trying to communicate with, the natural next step was to go into performance marketing to drive great business outcomes based on that information.
What were some of the pivotal moments in your career that shaped your leadership style?
Every challenging project that's been put in front of me has added a brick into the building that is my still incomplete leadership style. When I think about some pivotal moments, I think about certain crises that took place. I think about certain opportunities that presented themselves. And I think about certain people who were there to help me overcome those and mentor me along the way. One that comes to mind right now is a opportunity that was presented to myself and my team early on in my tenure at AmeriLife. AmeriLife was growing rapidly into the direct to consumer insurance space. Right now, insurance is sold via a multitude of channels. There's the agent to beneficiary relationship, there's the agency to beneficiary relationship, and more, there's a direct consumer relationship where agents who work for a company telephonically reach out to people and help them enroll in the plans that best meet their needs. That involves, as you might imagine, a great deal of technology. And for that technology to be successful, it has to be fast, it has to be fluent, and it has to allow the salesperson to do what they do best, which is to service the customer and focus on the customer without thinking about the technology and whether or not it's going to work in the background the way it should. So that was the first challenge we had here at AmeriLife. And it was pivotal in my mind in terms of generating and helping to add to my leadership style, because it taught me the difference between what involved leadership looks like and what micromanagement looks like. And one of those things is a very positive thing. I'm a big believer in involved leadership. If you're going to be at the helm of a project like this, or you're going to be co-captaining a project like this, you need to be involved, you need to be accessible, and you need to be aware, but you don't need to be conducting all the tasks. And actually, that's to the detriment of the project, nor do you need to be looking over the shoulder of everyone conducting the tasks in a way that disrupts their work. So striking that balance and seeing that when I pulled back a little more than I was naturally comfortable doing, and letting the experts do their work and letting people learn and make mistakes and grow from those mistakes and move on and do better the next time, showed me that there's an important distinction between ownership by involvement and ownership by micromanagement. Again, one being very positive, I believe, one being very negative.
So let's dive into your leadership style a bit more here. What are some of the key leadership principles you have, and how do you apply them at AmeriLife?
My two key leadership principles are empowerment and accountability. Making sure that people understand right from the jump that they will be empowered to do what it is that they're being asked to do, and that my role will be to advise them, coach them, give them feedback, and also to clear blockers on their behalf. But at the same time, with that empowerment and the implied responsibility, the very real responsibility that comes with that, there's also going to be accountability. And that will also be my job to enforce that accountability in terms of checking in and making sure things are going as promised. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to follow a linear path from point A to point B to point C. That's never the case. But what it does mean is that when there's a pivot that impacts the business deliverable, that needs to be communicated back so the expectation can be negotiated and changed as is reasonable. So those are the two core leadership principles right there. It's the empowerment, but also the associated accountability that comes with the empowerment of the people on my team. And to be honest with you, one of the biggest blessings working with AmeriLife are the individuals that I have the opportunity to work with every day. All of them have embraced this way of working, and the team was formed a short time ago, relatively speaking, just over the last 3 or 4 years, and right now is one of the highest performing, if not the highest performing team that I've ever had the benefit of working with.
So, how do you approach building and managing those high performing teams?
There's building, and then there's managing the teams, right? Building starts with the right hires. And I know that sounds simplistic, but it's absolutely true. I believe in a difficult interview process to enable a good working process. I don't know that people necessarily enjoy being interviewed by me, because I do ask really hard questions that lay bare what the expectations will be in an empowered situation like the one that I just described. Not everybody is comfortable with that, especially if you're looking for a role where you're more of an individual contributor than you are a team captain. So that's how I start in terms of building the team. And then once people are on the team, the second step in building them is really empowering them from day one. That doesn't mean that I throw them into the pool and expect them to be expert swimmers, but what it does mean is that when you're hired, the job begins day one. And I want to collaborate with you in whatever way is necessary in order to give you the coaching, the feedback, and the support necessary to thrive in that job. But I expect, and I let people know this, that there's going to be some hard knocks at the very beginning as they become part of the team. And then in terms of the managing the team, well, I believe that sets up a foundation for good management, where that empowerment and accountability type of structure would naturally grows out of that building process that you go into at the beginning.
Now, Bill, You are working right now to overcome a major operational challenge that has to do with compliance. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
I can, but before I do, I should describe a little bit more about what it is that AmeriLife does to contextualize the challenge that we're facing. Right now, the main product that AmeriLife sells, Medicare Advantage insurance, is being affected on the performance marketing side and on the sales side by some new regulations that will come into effect later this year. Those regulations can be broadly categorized as CMS regulations. The Center for Medicare Services is the government entity that regulates Medicare Advantage in the United States, as well as the FCC. The FCC has ownership of all the rules around communicating with people. And in lead generation, obviously, in sales, communication is one of the essential things that we need to do, and we need to do that in a compliant way. Every year, we're used to making incremental changes to our business operations based on these rules. This year, the rules changed a lot. Just to give you a briefing of what we're looking to overcome, FCC has been concerned for several years with something they call the lead generator loophole. And for any of us who own a phone, which I would expect would be all of us, we do receive, unfortunately, a lot of unwanted spam calls, sales solicitations coming to us. And it wastes our time, it interrupts us, and it's something that's just frankly annoying. The FCC is similarly concerned about this, and what the FCC is attempting to do is to close some of the consent loopholes that have allowed lead generators to legally place these calls. It used to be that in order for a lead to be considered valid, in other words, for a company to have express prior written consent to reach out to somebody, that they and the companies that might be reaching out to you didn't have to be listed front and center on, for example, a web form. They could be behind a hyperlink, behind a URL. And unless you click on that URL, you may not know who your information would be passed on to. The agents in our network rely on leads in order to fuel their business. So we have to make sure that however they're getting those leads, they're doing it in a compliant fashion. And here has what has changed. Now express written consent needs to be one-to-one instead of one-to-many as it was previously. So if you can imagine a lead being generated for somebody who's interested in home insurance, that person might also be contacted if an entity was named in this hyperlink for an automobile warranty or solar panels on their home, or in our case, Medicare insurance. Now those leads need to say that AmeriLife will be contacting them directly. So that's something that we are prepared to overcome and we are prepared to action against, but it is a lot of work. It potentially could have been disruptive, but we've been thinking about this for a long time. We've known that the winds of change were blowing and that this was something that we needed to get out in front of. So thankfully, with the support of our executive leadership team and my peers at AmeriLife, we've taken effective measures to be prepared for this, and we're working right now to make sure that the flow of leads to our agents will be absolutely uninterrupted.
That definitely is a big challenge to overcome. Now, I wanted to segue a bit here into some industry insights. What advice would you give to somebody who's starting off in the performance marketing industry right now?
The advice that I would give somebody right now who is starting off in performance marketing would be the following: master AI. I happen to be a big proponent of the empowerment, the force multiplier that AI is. I think that it's going to allow us to do our job better and not necessarily replace people doing our jobs. The only way that I think somebody will not succeed in this industry is if they ignore or hope that there's some kind of regulation or other event that takes AI out of their lives. AI is here to stay, and the best thing you can do is to dive in right now and become the best prompt engineer you can, explore the tools that are out there to help automate your workflows, and really make those as much a part of your portfolio as an artist would who is looking for a creative design job.
Well, given your response on AI, I think I know what your answer to this next question might be, but I wanted to ask, what are your predictions for the future of performance and affiliate marketing?
Well, my prediction is that there's going to be a ton more automation. I mean, for years, people have been talking about big data and programmatic ad buying and automatic optimization of campaigns. That is just now, in my mind, becoming real. And it's going to be the sophistication of those systems that is going to ultimately determine the winners and losers in the next version of performance marketing. What I mean by that is a losing scenario, in my opinion, is taking your existing practices and simply automating them using AI. The winning scenario is going to be taking your existing processes and being willing to blow them up in favor of a potential new way of operating that uses AI top to bottom, informed by the insights that you have that can only be received from actually observing human behavior. And that's where the human factor will never be lost in this industry.
What does performance optimization mean to you in today's business landscape?
Performance optimization to me is not a term that really has varied very much during my career, but the ability to get to that point of maximum optimization has. So performance optimization means exactly what you think it does, at least in my mind, which is getting the greatest ROI on your performance marketing spends, right? The differentiation between then and now is that while you might have had a maximum multiple in the past of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6x, now that's just table stakes. Now performance optimization means you can get very much closer to what would actually be your maximum return on investment. So the benchmark is changing. I don't know that the definition is changing, and it's going to become much. People who are performance marketing leaders are going to have to be accountable to a higher set of KPIs given all the technology that's out there, because when somebody figures it out, there is a knock-on effect that will definitely impact the business success of those that are able to employ a more efficient and more optimized systems. If, in my case, agents have a total cost of acquisition of $150 and there's another agency that's able to do it for $125, given the number of policies that many of these agencies do, that's real money real quick. So it's those increasing efficiencies that are really changing now.
Can you share a personal anecdote or story that highlights your passion for the industry?
I can. And as I say that, I hesitate a little bit because this is a deeply personal story, but I'm going to share it because I think it's the closest example of what you're looking for. 3 years ago, there was a conference when I was just starting off in this business called Medicarians. It was being held in Chicago, Illinois. I was asked at the last minute to go in and speak on behalf of a real industry leader who had been doing this for a long time and who people were looking forward to see. I was asked to speak as a substitute because they weren't able to make it. And I was brand new in this business, and all of the experience that I had in this business had to do with this tech build that I described at the beginning of this conversation. So I hadn't really gotten into the nitty-gritty of the distribution organization, the actual sales process. And I was going to speak to a bunch of agents and agency owners. And I felt, I guess the best way to say it was a bit of imposter syndrome. Do I even belong there? And I don't think I've ever told anybody this story besides my wife, but I nearly canceled the trip because I was so reluctant to step into this role, and I felt so unprepared. And my wife said to me, she said, "You've got a choice to make. You can certainly skip it." She said, "Or you can go there with the attitude that everyone has a first time of doing something difficult. You can embrace this industry. You can learn as much as you can. You can take your slings and arrows. You can trip, and then you can decide that you're going to go back next year and do it even better." And she said, "Knowing you, in a few years, you'll be somebody that's recognized at these events." And 2 years later, after a Medicarians, I was approached by a group of my peers, and I was asked to run for president of the Insurance Marketing Coalition.
Wow.
And I knew before then, and certainly after that, that I had found my spot. And all credit to my beautiful wife. She was right.
Wow, that's an incredible story, and I'm sure there's plenty of people listening here who can relate. And thank you again for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Now, focusing a bit more on the current trends in the industry, what are the biggest challenges and opportunities right now facing the performance marketing industry?
The top three are compliance, compliance, and compliance. If you aren't generating leads in a compliant fashion, you are subjecting your company to potentially hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of liability. You are also subjecting your brand to a potential reputational hit that you have no right to encumber your company with. So that's it. It's all about compliance. You don't need to be a lawyer to do this job, but you sure better know those regulations. And yes, it can be tedious. These regulations are generally hundreds of pages long. You have to sift through all of that information, and you have to find the relevant things. You have to put them up on your bulletin board, and you have to institute policies and procedures that are compliance first. Without that, you are putting not just your own livelihood, but the livelihood of everyone who works for your company at risk.
That completely makes sense. I mean, compliance is a huge factor today. Now, I wanted to focus a bit more on AmeriLife as a company and your strategy as a whole. What are AmeriLife's key differentiators in the competitive performance and affiliate marketing software landscape?
We'd like to think of ourselves at AmeriLife as a comprehensive distribution platform for agents and agencies. And our key differentiator is, and I know it sounds cliched, but it is very real. Our key differentiator is our culture. Our culture is one where everybody is laser focused on our mission, which is to help seniors live longer, healthier lives. That is what we do every day. And you come to work with that reinforced with everything that you're exposed to in the office. Now, how does that pertain to something like software, you might ask? We're designing systems using a human design philosophy that makes it easy for our agents and agencies to be able to accomplish that mission. We are integrating our systems in a way that gives people insight into what's happening in their book of business such that they can be there for the beneficiaries that they are privileged to serve and make sure that those people are in the best plans that they can be in. So again, it sounds cliched, it really does, but culturally, this is the best company that I've ever worked for. And everything they do, from technology to communications to products, is all focused around that central tenet of our culture, which is empowering people to live healthier, more fulfilled lives.
Speaking of these technologies that AmeriLife is utilizing, I wanted to ask, how does AmeriLife plan to stay ahead of emerging technologies and trends in this industry?
Well, I can't give too many specific details on this in terms of specific platforms and technologies, but what I can say is there is a team. For example, the team that I lead, the product that we run is called LeadStar. It's a lead platform that's available that has a comprehensive set of leads for agents and agencies under contract with AmeriLife. We're right now in the middle of developing LeadStar 2.0. We're not quite ready to announce the features yet, but I can tell you that behind the scenes they've been locked in. And when you think about adding more products, adding more services, adding more variety, having a catalog that's comprehensive of different leads at different price points, that all went into our consideration set. And by the way, going back to the beginning again of this conversation, that was all informed from direct consumer research. In this case, the consumers are the agents who are using the platform. We asked them, how likely are you to recommend this to another licensed agent? How satisfied are you with this program? And when you ask that question about a leads platform, that's a dangerous question to ask because there's this age-old battle between marketing and sales. It's the lead quality is bad. No, the sales process quality is bad. You can take it on the chin, but I was thankful to see that we didn't have to take it on the chin too hard. We got a lot of productive feedback from the agents who are using this system, from the agencies who are managing their agents in this system, and they have informed what we are doing next. So without going into any specific details, I will say this. As part of our culture, AmeriLife is a company that listens to its consumers, in this case, agents and agencies, and designs technology solutions that's based on that feedback.
Can you share some insights on AmeriLife's recent growth and future expansion plans?
What I can tell you is this, is AmeriLife is very aggressively growing, both organically and inorganically. And for those of you who may wonder about the application of those two terms, AmeriLife is hyper competitive in terms of acquiring businesses that fit the type of business we're looking for. Those that align with our culture, those that align with our grinder mentality of going in there and growing. We have the ability to acquire these companies, therefore adding to our inorganic growth, which we've been very successful in doing. I think that we're up to 90 individual companies, both on the health and wealth sides combined. Those companies continue to operate in the way they did previously with the backing and support of the AmeriLife parent organization, which then fuels the other side of the equation, which is the organic growth, which is doing more with more together as one. That's our hashtag, together as one. We give more to these organizations so that they can then do more. And there's very much a management philosophy here that starts at the top, which is this empowerment and accountability, right? These agencies that work for us, they're empowered to go out and grow their business, and they're accountable for that growth. And so far, it's resulted in what I would call very stellar financial and growth metrics over the 4 years that I've been able to work with this company.
How does AmeriLife ensure its products are constantly evolving to meet the needs of its clients?
One of the key differentiators that AmeriLife has is its product development group. We have proprietary products, and I'm not involved with this group as much as I would like to be, and that's my own loss, and I need to remedy that. But we have a product development group that is constantly looking for opportunities to develop better proprietary products that we then roll out to our agents and advisors under contract. It is a huge part of the AmeriLife success story. So when you're talking about sophisticated instruments, like annuities, for example, I was hard pressed when I came to this business to even to define what an annuity is. And it turns out that an annuity is not necessarily a standardized product in terms of one annuity is the same as another annuity. It's not like a savings account. It's not like a certificate of deposit. It's a pretty sophisticated instrument. We have some of the best products in the wealth space that are available to anybody. And it's one of the main reasons why advisors gravitate towards the AmeriLife family. The ability to work with these products that have been developed by our product development team in order to give the best value to the beneficiaries and also to fuel the books of business for our advisors.
Speaking a bit more about client success here, can you share a specific example of how AmeriLife has helped a client achieve significant success?
I can. One of the things that I haven't mentioned on this podcast yet is another area of my responsibility, which is a service for our agents, agencies, and advisors called Your Digital Lab. So if you can imagine the complexities of the insurance space and taking those complexities and trying to explain them to a traditional digital marketing agency, for example, you want to have a website run with a digital campaign. You might spend the first part of your engagement simply going through how it is the business operates, what our compliance framework is, what some of the mandatories are. We have a team that we've stood up here in the last year and a half with all of that intrinsic knowledge and all of that experience that is specifically servicing our agents, agencies, and affiliates on those digital marketing campaigns. Can I name one? I could name hundreds of success stories where we've taken people from a legacy website that was set up on Wix, a few years ago, to a fully functional educational platform that's now running on WordPress that gives them comprehensive tracking and data about the traffic that's going into that site and the results that are coming through in terms of the return on their investment. So yeah, that's a real crown in the real jewel in the crown rather of AmeriLife's marketing team, to the ability for us to offer that group of individuals who are well versed in insurance and well versed in digital marketing to take ideas to implementation more quickly than any other agency in the nation.
Now, you may have just touched on this a bit there, but I wanted to know, what are the biggest pain points AmeriLife helps its clients solve, and how do its solutions address them?
If you are an independent agent or an independent advisor or an independent agency, in order to sell the products that are required for your beneficiaries, you need to have a contractual relationship with those carriers, whether it's an insurance carrier or another entity that you'd want to do business with. That's a huge pain point. The contracting process, the training, the recertification process to get ready to sell is very cumbersome. Right. We absolutely streamline that for everybody. If you're an insurance agent and you're listening to this, or a small agency that's unaffiliated right now, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's the value of IMOs, independent marketing organizations, and FMOs, field marketing organizations. We have marketers and other experts here on site that can streamline that for you and get you from licensure all the way to selling very, very quickly, and frankly, a lot less expensively than people are able to do it on their own.
Definitely. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about your personal insights. How do you maintain a work-life balance in such a demanding industry?
Many years ago, I realized that a personal characteristic that I do not possess and that I needed to develop was patience. My father worked for Ford Motor Company for 37 and a half years. But before he did that, as he was growing up on his parents' farm, he learned to be a carpenter. And he actually put himself through school as a carpenter. And at night and on the weekends, he and I would often work on projects together. And I don't think that he was the most patient man I'd ever met either. He's a wonderful man, but I don't think that he had an innate sense of patience. I certainly don't have it. But that activity forced patience, because if you rush it, you're going to ruin it. So I decided several years ago that I was going to leverage what my father had taught me, and I was going to continue to develop that. So I am a very avid woodworker. My garage downstairs. Yes, my garage downstairs is my wife and my woodworking studio. And we, most nights when we're home together, certainly most weekends when we're home together, we're out there building. And building is something that takes your focus away from the things that would otherwise nag at the margins of your mind. It's impossible for me to be looking at my email or my text messages while I'm working with a table saw or a bandsaw. If I do, I'm likely not going to be able to respond because I'm going to be in the emergency room, right? So there's a forcing function
Right.
when it comes to patience. So yes, very often you'll see me disconnecting in a way that really does force me to be disconnected by going downstairs, putting on some headphones, putting on some eye protection, asking my wife what's next, and turning on loud machines and not worrying about my email until I get up in the morning.
So you've mentioned your wife and you've mentioned your father, but I wanted to ask, who have been your mentors and role models, and how have they influenced your career so far?
So I'll take you back to Michigan and my first job after college. I worked, as I mentioned, as director of information technology at a nonprofit organization. That nonprofit organization was the Michigan State Medical Society, and my supervisor was a man named John Richards. John knew nothing about computers, but he knew everything about people, and he knew everything about business. And without making it sound too self-aggrandizing, he saw something that I didn't see in myself, and he took me under his wing, and he taught me how to be an effective business person. Everything that I do today, I believe the foundation was set, at least in part, by John's work with me. In terms of client engagement, for example, John would get in his Oldsmobile and he would drive halfway across the state or all the way across the state if somebody wanted to see him and somebody had an issue. He would enforce the need for me to be entirely transparent and proactive in my communications. He empowered me to do things that otherwise would have been an intimidating risk for a 21-year-old person coming out of college. And he and I used to butt heads constantly, but it was constructive. And I will always be grateful for the way John took me under his wing, trusted me, challenged me, empowered me, but then held me accountable in the way that I try to with the people I work with today.
Yeah, having a mentor like that early in your career can definitely help set a standard of how to move forward. Now, I wanted to ask, what innovations or trends are you most excited about in the marketing technology space?
I think I mentioned this earlier, and I know that this is a theme for probably most of the interviews that you're doing right now, Alex. But what I'm most excited about is, again, the application of AI to large data sets. And what I mean by that is this. Go back to the beginning of my career when technology morphed into, observational dynamics and market research and customer insights. Now I have the ability to use AI tools without a huge team of human analysts doing it manually and potentially making mistakes, to look at data sets of actual activities that are taking place and derive more accurate insights from that type of information. Now, there'd never be a substitute for observational research, ethnographic research, just seeing what people are doing and how they interact with technology. When it comes to understanding, for example, the pain points on a customer experience, we now have the ability with AI tools to be able to parse through large data sets to say, this is where the experience breaks down, this is where the experience shines, and therefore, these are the opportunities to invest that we should be taking advantage of.
Definitely. I think AI is more than just a hot topic now, it's a reality, so there's no surprise that it's seen more in the industry today. So, with our final few questions here, I wanted to ask, you spoke earlier about yourself as a 21-year-old fresh in the industry. If you could go back, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Just like companies, it's important to have a culture. It's important to have a vision. It's important to have a mission. It's important to have values. I think that you need to decide very early on in your career what your mission, what your vision, and more importantly, what your values are going to be and how you're going to approach things. I've thought about this quite a bit throughout my career and what I would say to my younger self. And I keep going back to a poet who's actually from Michigan, just like me. He was born in the early 1900s. He was born in Saginaw, Michigan. His name was Theodore Retke. He's not very well known. I don't know how many poets are very well known, but he was a brilliant poet. And his favorite quote is, "What we need is more people who specialize in the impossible." I would tell myself, always be the person in the room who specializes in the impossible.
That's some great advice there. So we're running up on time here, and I wanted to say thank you, Bill. But before we finish up here, how can listeners stay connected with you and keep up with your work?
Thank you, Alex. On LinkedIn, you can look for my profile, William DeCourcy. Also on YouTube and X, I have a channel at Professor Leads, where twice a week I publish insights in a video podcast on marketing topics of interest, digital marketing space, compliance, lead generation, how to run effective campaigns, things of that nature. I just started it a few weeks ago, so if anybody wanted to give me some feedback on that through the commenting functionality, I certainly would appreciate it. But yes, you can look for Professor Leads on social networks and follow, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Bill. I'm sure our listeners will go check you out. This was a great conversation, and I look forward to the next time we can speak.
Thank you, Alex. It was my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Informed Insights. To learn more or listen to another episode, please visit informian.com.